Welcome everybody to today's session. I'm Garen Griffiths and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and today I'm going to be talking about communication and the teenage brain. You're probably a parent of teenagers and that's why you're watching this, and I know you've had challenges communicating with your teens at times. Some do better than others, but most of us parents of teens have moments where we just want to pull our hair out because communicating with our teens can be so challenging and difficult. I know that from both professional experience, because I work a lot with teenagers and their families, and I know it from personal experience because I have two teenage daughters, 17 and 16, and a son that's 12 or a preteen, just getting ready to become a teenager. And so it's not easy, and we can sometimes get frustrated with our teen, we can get frustrated with ourselves. And so I hope the information in this video will help you understand your teen better and understand yourself better. Because anytime we want our teen behavior to change, we also want to look in the mirror and change some of our own behavior. So that's my challenge for you as you watch this. Not just think about what your teen can do differently, but what you can do differently as well. One resource I'll be referencing and using the information from is a book called Why Do They Act That Way by David Walsh. I highly recommend picking it up and reading it. And if you're going to have any length of time with them, or if you have younger kids coming up and will be teenagers down the road, I think this is a must read for parents in general. And so anyway, it's a great resource. All right, let's evaluate ourselves. I'm going to go over some statements that I want you to read as I'm saying them and be thinking about how you do with these. It's either yes or no. The more yeses you have, the better. The more no's you have, the more work you have to do. All right, let's look at these. I am a good listener. I can tolerate some adolescent attitude. I am able to avoid power struggles with my teenager. I am able to remain calm even when my teen doesn't. I understand the brain's role in teen communication. I can avoid generalizations when talking to my teen. When communication becomes tense, I can stay focused on one issue at a time. I never engage in name-calling or put-downs when talking to my teenager. I never swear or use foul language toward my teen or other people. And I do not accept foul or abusive language from my teen. All right, so how did you do? Again, I don't expect you to be perfect. I know I'm not in these. Parenting teens is always a work in progress. We will fail at times. We will succeed at times. We will traumatize our children at times unintentionally. And if we do, we need to be able to cut ourselves some slack. But I think we also have to be, again, willing to develop skills ourselves and to grow as parents. So that's my hope, again, that as you watch this video, you pick up some things that you can start to do differently. All right, let's talk about the teen brain and how it affects their communication. One of the first important things to understand is some brain development into some systems of the brain, and compare them both with the adolescent brain and the adult brain. There's two major parts, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system is responsible for the emotions that we feel. And especially there's a little part of that system called the amygdala. And the amygdala reacts first and asks questions later. And so in this part of the brain, the limbic system, during adolescence, is on hyperdrive. It's fully developed and it's really rearing to go. So if your teen's ever walked into the room, or 1 minute they're pleasant and the next minute they're an emotional wreck, it's like they have the engine of a race car in their brain, in that emotional part of their brain, and they can go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat, maybe even faster. And so that's a big challenge when this emotional part of the brain is on hyperdrive and the prefrontal cortex that is responsible for reasoning is delayed in development right now. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But that makes it challenging to communicate, because whether I'm working with parents and teens or with couples, when it comes to communication, one of the fundamental skills that we need to communicate effectively is individual emotion regulation skills. Now, even us adults don't do great at managing our emotions. And so how can we expect our teens to manage their emotions perfectly or as reasonably as us? And we can't, in large part because of their brain and their experiences. And so that's important to understand, that this limbic system is in full force in adolescence, and that makes it difficult for them to communicate effectively. And this leads to challenge number 2, is because this emotional part of the brain is on overdrive and in full force, they have the tendency to misread other people's emotions, and especially us as parents. How many times is you've been communicating with a teen, you think it's going well, they say something, you have a reaction, maybe surprise, maybe something, whatever, but they interpret it as that you're angry with them, and then they blow up and then back into that, going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat, and you're sitting there left, and they storm off to their room, and you're sitting there going, what just happened? Again, they have a challenge. Studies have shown that they misread facial cues differently than us adults, and they misread emotions much more frequently than we do as adults. That part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is fully developed in us as the adult, can differentiate and read emotions and facial cues in our children and other people much more accurately. All right, so if their emotion part of the brain is like the engine of a race car, being able to calm down is like they have the brakes of a Model T Ford. And that's a challenge. Obviously, that's a bad combo. And so we as parents really need to be the braking system for them. We need to teach them how to regulate emotions. And one of the best ways that we can do that is to model effective emotion regulation ourselves. So if you're one that can say that you struggle with regulating your emotions and you have a hot temper, then you want to work on learning how to regulate your own emotions so that you can communicate effectively with them. And so you put all 3 of these challenges together. Number 1, a quick emotional response, plus misinterpretation of others' emotions, plus lousy breaks, that equals poor communication. And so this is some of the reasoning behind some of their poor communication when it comes to brain development. Now, there's a lot of other things that come into play and skills and tools, but again, the purpose of this video is really to discuss how the brain plays a role in teens' lack of ability to communicate effectively. And again, hopefully as the parent, as the adult, in our fully developed brain, that we can communicate much more effectively and keep our emotions in check more effectively as well. All right, now let's talk about some don'ts and some do's when communicating with our teen. All right, the first list I'll go over is a list of don'ts. Some of them may seem obvious, but sadly enough for some parents, they still fall into these traps. So let's go over them. Don't swear or use abusive language. Don't accept swearing or abusive language from them. Don't get caught up in a yelling match. Don't name call, criticize, or put down. And don't leave conflict unresolved. All right, again, those may seem obvious, but we can do them more often than we realize, especially yelling and name calling or even labeling them. That will be really offensive to our teen, and they will shut down the communication with us if we do those things. All right, let's talk about what to do. Do keep calm and model effective communication skills. Do clearly state your feelings. Do educate your teen on their own brain, but don't do this during an argument. When you slip, apologize. And then finally, listen, listen, listen. Let them know you understand where they are coming from, but never say you understand what they are going through, because you probably do not. Validate their thoughts and emotions, Expect and tolerate a little attitude. Walk away or let them walk away if necessary, and assure them that you love them. So those are some things that you can hopefully help you better understand your teen with, understand their brain development, understand what you can do and what you shouldn't do when communicating with your teen. Let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and how this has potentially played a role in you and your teen's communication. Now, this can go one or two ways. I've heard both from personal friends and family and from clients that this isolation and quarantine through COVID-19 has actually strengthened their communication with their teen. And they've gotten along better, they've communicated better. Why? Well, if you followed strict quarantine rules, at least in the beginning, they weren't around their friends a whole bunch, they weren't at school, and so what are most of our fights and arguments with our teenagers over? Friends, or who they're hanging out with, what they're doing with their friends, and their schoolwork. So you take those two things out of the picture, you're probably going to communicate more effectively with your teen. Now, or maybe the flip side has been the case, and being around each other so much has created more conflict and whatnot. And hopefully, again, talking about some of these skills and tools and understanding the brain development will help us reduce that conflict as well. I think one of the biggest things we can be aware of and looking for throughout this, even though we're at the tail end, things that come up in the future as well. Maybe your teen expressed concern or worry or had some anxiety over what was going on, what they heard on the news or whatnot. One thing we don't want to do is to invalidate that or tell them they shouldn't be feeling that way or not to worry, it's no big deal, or this or that. Regardless of what we think or feel about the whole COVID-19 thing, what we want to be aware of is our teens' emotions. And we want to learn how to listen to them and understand where they're coming from and validate that they have a right to their thoughts and their emotions. Now, if there's some things that we can do to help ease their anxieties and their fears, and we can talk through it, but again, we don't want to invalidate how they're thinking or they're feeling in regards to this. And so hopefully you've been able to have some good conversation with your family and your teens in regards to their thoughts and their opinions about this. And you may have each a different thought and opinion about it. But that's something I would consider in understanding communication in this situation. I hope for you it's been a strength. I hope you've taken advantage of spending time with your teen and having dinner together, going on walks together, or whatever the case may be, playing games together. I hope this has actually strengthened your relationship, because I know, again, for many people it has. All right, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. You can contact me at this email address and ask, again, any questions that you may have about what we talked about today, or if you have other questions as well. Thank you for your time. Make it a great day and make it a great week.